For the long time, I've been an advocate for Christian Petzold's films. He did Phoenix, Transit, and Barbara. That's kind of his trilogy of love during the time of totalitarian fascism. But he's kind of straight off and kind of doing these another triptych where he's using elements like water, fire, and earth and wind. Last year he did Undine, which is carried very much of a water theme. And now he's on to the element of fire with this one, of course, fire.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to his next adaptation of Michael Bay's The Rock for his Earth thing.
Could be that, yes, yeah. So today we're talking about a new film from him, Christian Petzold, Afire.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hi, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, you can help us out by liking and subscribing to the channel. Tell your friends about the show. Keep the conversation going by add a comment down below. And, of course, they can follow us on X and Instagram that way, too. Both Kyle and I, of course, are members of Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critics reviews as well as ours. And, of course, I forgot. Heck yeah, we do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great content. We just put some new material up there as recently. And a great opportunity to tell us what movies we can review on future episodes with, of course, a shout-out to you. And today we're going to talk about a foreign film. We hardly ever do it.
We did it a lot earlier on in the show, and I'd like to return to it because we got some empty space here. But yeah, definitely Afire. Let's talk about it. Leon and Felix stay at a family summer home, also occupied by Nadia, while Leon works on his book. Leon currently does have his work being called work instead of play, while the others are off enjoying themselves. As Leon opens up more, he begins to see the value of living, if only he can just get out of his own head.
So this film already has won the Silver Bear Grand Jury Prize in the Berlin International Film Festival. It was nominated for Best Film at the Sydney Film Festival. And now it gets distribution. It's one of the small groups so far of Germany's official selection for Best Foreign Film in the Academy Awards. That hasn't been announced yet, but it's one of the candidates.
Yeah, they haven't officially decided which one they're going with, but I've read the other titles and I've never seen them, so I guess so far this is my favorite of those.
Yeah, and they hardly ever, Christian Petzold's movies ever get selected for Germany's candidacy for Academy Awards, but I think you can still find Phoenix on Netflix. I'm a huge fan of Transit. I thought it was one of the best films of a couple of years back. And here he's kind of subdued. So, right, it's a little more proximity than Christian is used to.
Yeah, there is a house and there is about 4 people, 5 once that other character shows up near the end of the film. But this is my first Christian Petzold film, so I kind of didn't really know what to expect from him. I'm aware of him as a director, but of course if you haven't seen one film from a director, you don't know what you're getting into in a lot of ways. So
I'll kind of explain a little bit more as we go into detail. Of course, stars new person, Thomas Schubert. He's the lead in this. And then Paula Beer, she was actually the lead in Undine, and she plays kind of the only female in this movie.
Yeah, but she's not the same character, right? These are thematically different, or thematically similar films, narratively different.
Okay. Correct, yes. Cinematography is from Hans Froma. He's worked with Christian before. I think if you think about it, Christian as a new person being a director, he's been doing this, he's almost 60 years old. He's been doing this for quite a bit of time, and finally he's just getting some accolades for making movies.
I appreciate his one-word titles. There's so many of them. Once they've been translated to English, it's like, okay, they're snappy. They're right in there.
There's not much to talk about this other than it was filmed, I think, primarily last summer, early fall. And then it got kicked around the film festival circuit. Other than that, I really don't know much background of it because he kind of keeps it close to his chest of what he's doing.
Yeah, and even his initial description of the film back in 2020 when he was talking about it does not match what the film that we came out for was. So I'm not sure if he's taking elements of that for his other 2 films in this series. I assume Earth and Air will have their own piece. But it's interesting to note, like, again, we always talk about, like, your first draft is not your final draft. And I think that's the case where in 2020 he was talking about this film, hinting at certain elements of it that are not prevalent in the finished product at all. So kind of seeing how that mold goes through from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want to showcase world-building events, like in terms of wildfires, which we deal with in America quite a bit, it's really easy to do so within the confines of 4 people in a house talking about it.
Yeah. I guess previous episodes, previous films, like Phoenix is very Alfred Hitchcockian suspense. It was about a woman who was disfigured in a concentration camp, so she looks different, and she's trying to find who ratted her out as a Jewish person to be sent there. So she comes back into society. Nobody recognizes her, and she's trying to figure out which one sent her to the concentration camp. So it's very Alfred Hitchcock suspenseful.
I'm going to take that out of my crowd pleaser section and put that somewhere else.
Transit's very unique because the aesthetic has no really set time to it, but there's just stormtroopers dressed all in black, being authoritarian. So it's almost like a present day equilibrium, but those you have this undercurrent of a love story. Yeah, I think it's perfect opportunity because there's not much to talk about for our background. We get to our review. Let's do it.
Really, you just mentioned like all the most depressing combination of things you could put in a movie, and
he works with this kind of.
We don't really hit that depression in this film until the wildfires become more prevalent. As the film kind of gets to a close. One thing that captivated me, and I'll say this is not a flaw with the movie, but let me just describe it as Thomas Schubert plays one of the best douchebags I've ever seen. Leon is such an unlikable character, and what's unique about his portrayal is that it is real. And again, I know a lot of writers, and I'm not saying all writers are douchebags, because I am a writer, and I'm only a little douchebag. But the way in which he plays it as though I have work to do, and I can't go and do these fun things with you. And I think the centralized idea of what Leon is dealing with here, and dealing in it is a loose sense, but living through, is that writers have this tendency to feel like the writing is the work, and if the writing is the work, it's not good writing because you are not taking anything back out of it. And so he's so focused on what he has to do to accomplish this that he has stopped living. And I think there needs to be a triumvirate of reading, writing, and living if you want to be a successful writer. And he's not doing one of those 3 tenets.
No, he's punching out and putting blinders onto he's doing everything wrong.
Yeah. He has this perfect setup.
My God, only if I just go out in the country and void of any other outside influences, I can crank out this great novel. Which obviously is not going great.
Yeah. It's back to those if-then statements like we talked about with Trees Lounge. If only I could get out to this nice, secluded place where I can have solitude. And it's like, well, you're already going out there with one other person, so you're not going to have full solitude. And he's like ignoring the fact that there's a beautiful beach and there's swimming available. There's this gorgeous woman that just happened to show up.
Who actually is kind of representing this flighty, this live life kind of a cliche. It's almost dancing on all these cliches and doesn't really go to full fruition. But understand there's a base cliche. Yeah. And I love when you play on those and you realize, oh, that's my initial instinct, but that's not really true. I think I like Christian almost like it's like peeling the characters away like an orange. Yeah. To realize that there's something good inside of them. No matter how much of a jerk Leon is.
Yeah. Well, that's why I've never really believed in the idea of like cliches and tropes and all these things, because again, it always goes back, and I've said this before, it's not the story you tell, but how you tell it. And this is a case where, it does hinge on a lot of things that are very, very, by the numbers in terms of plotting.
But it's understood, it's from Leon's point of view. He doesn't realize his best friend is gay. And everyone's like, well, how did you not know? Right? Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. They're the ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say this, that was a very funny scene. Yeah. If only for the fact that, like, when he wakes up and everyone's together, I assumed it was going to be all 3 of them. And he was, and that was just like, oh, well, they're having a good time. And I love that he gets that, like, the walls are really thin. And it's a great little shift right there.
But it's I love the character because for a writer, he's not absorbing the world around him. He's not minding his surroundings because he thinks if he could just crank this out in a vacuum, it's going to kick out some magnificent story. And that's not what you should be doing. Mm-hmm. You should understand, take in, maybe like use things from the world to incorporate into your story. I'm not sorry, like read other books to get what they're saying, but like Leon's at the beach, you have great material to talk about something that started at the beach. Mm-hmm. You have these interesting things that are happening outside. You have this fire that's catastrophic that he's trying to ignore.
You're surrounded by that.
You're surrounded by that's going to encompassing you, and you're like, well, yeah, that's far away.
Yeah, and the differences in both how Leon operates and Felix. You know, Felix goes to the beach, he's in the water, he's living his life, he's interacting with other people, he's learning about their lives, he's actively interested in David's role as a what is it, swim rescuer?
Yeah. Not a lifeguard.
Not a lifeguard, swim rescuer. So he's actively interested in the people around him. He's taking pictures of people staring out at the water. He's getting his ideas from life.
Yeah.
And what's ironic too is that even at the end of the film, and I won't get into how the film ends, but there's a moment where Leon basically has to embrace what Felix was doing, taking pictures of these people staring out at the water. And what I hate about Leon so much, and again, not a flaw of the film, but I hate Leon so much because when he hears these opportunities, he's mad that Nadia doesn't give him good feedback on his book. He doesn't give good feedback to Felix on his work.
Yeah.
He does the same thing. He shuts him down. And that's why I think this is a case of not likable, and I would even say not interesting, but I'm more interested in how he views everyone else. So the other characters lift up the narrative because they're more interesting and more likable.
Right. And it's almost like when everybody's turn to shine, you have everybody being their opportunities, not just characters being theatrical, but in the point of the story, them to, like, you know, the rescuer, they're going to help with the car, all of this stuff. Leon goes in the background.
Yeah.
And it's very fitting at the end there, where, there's this person I like, I'll just stand behind the shadows, I'll just be part of the landscape.
Yeah.
Where he's not going up to the person, he's not stepping forward to an adventure. It's almost like he's trying to creep in, almost cringy like.
Yeah. And there's even
on the
scene
cover. He's
with,
the perfect person on
yeah,
the cover.
He's hidden behind. There's not a face on the cover. There's the scene where he's talking with his publisher, and it's a really kind of emotional scene as the publisher's learn new health things about himself. And his response is, what's this going to do to me and my work? And again, like, he's focused on the work. And I think that's part of the problem is that we view that relationship between a writer and a publisher as he has a deadline. And I think there's nothing that's better and worse for a writer than a deadline, because we start to make it about the work then. But it's necessary to have.
Right. I'm doing a novel and I'm stuck on a scene because I want to make sure the dialogue flow is balanced and understands rather than just spitting exposition out. And it's been taking a while because I want to make sure I've been writing notes every day. And I won't be able to go into a cabin excluding and crank that out. It has to live on, journey of just walking, talking to yourself out loud. It's just the ideas of, I'm just going to get this done, and I'm going to shut the door to the world. And it can be effective for little things, but not for cranking out. It sounds like it's first time publishing too.
Well, he's got one book out that he's finished, but he's like, his second one is struggling, and we all understand, like, struggling with your work like that.
But if your publisher's reading out loud what you wrote, and in fact even you're like,
that's the whole thing too. Is he's not a self-critiquer. Yeah. And the thing is, he doesn't seem to believe in self-critique. Now, I went to college for English because I wanted to spend a lot of money and get not a lot back.
And guess what? You're going to get critiqued.
You're going to get critiqued, and if for nothing else, college taught me the value of critique and the value of peer discussion. And with this case, he gives this book over to his publisher, and he says, "Well, I'm going to read it so you can hear it." There's nothing better to the editing process than hearing your own damn words repeated back to you, because you realize how terrible they are and that you should fix them.
That's why you have table reads for film festivals. If people want to do your movie and you have actors with your script reading it, and if there's a point like, oh my God, who wrote that?
Well, sometimes you find that the actor is not the right person for, or like you find that the role is not written right for this actor or something like that.
Yeah, but if anybody says a line that even you're like, oh my God, I have to change that.
Yeah. I mean, there were plenty of times with the last feature I wrote where I was like, that's not the actor I thought would do this role. I need to fix my writing to match him.
Yes.
And I think you need to have it. It's not fun. It's not comfortable, the editing process. I hate the editing process.
And I think
but that's it.
I think it was hard for him, Christian, to write this because I think it's probably a little self-autobiographical, whether he doesn't want to admit it or not. Yeah. I think there's a lot more to him in this, a lot more Leon in him in this than happens, because he's an older filmmaker who's just starting out in the last 15 years making movies.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's done like television and stuff like that. He's other movies, but this is where he's finally got his gears together, and I think he's putting a lot of what he's learned being a writer and not doing into Leon.
Yeah, and that's where I think my one big issue with the movie, the thing that pulls me back a little bit, is I think that his quirky character study piece at the beginning is quite interesting, and I do think the seriousness of what the fire brings as the film goes on is interesting and solid.
Right.
I don't think that the tonal shift works as well as it could. There's a really it's a heavy and quick tonal shift that I don't think preps me as a viewer for where the film is going, and it's not necessary that I have to be prepped, but I don't think that I really caught on to what the film was tonally shifting towards.
Right.
And so I think there's some definite, and you said before, his films tend to be very heavy.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the fact that he's never had to make a tonal shift work in this way, and I don't think it does as well.
No, there's a lot of like, oh, we're just investigating characters at a cottage, and it's kind of interesting. We kind of forget that there is a fire going on, and it comes almost angelic, almost like snowing ash, and almost looks beautiful. You understand the danger of it's getting closer, and then you see the consequences of the fire, and he puts the camera right into it, and you're like, okay, all right. And I think that was supposed to be a shift of Leon growing up a little bit, as a,
does he?
does he really? But and it comes again to the ending is very. Could you fill in the blanks for it? It's not a solid ending, but it's a very. I would say I don't want to say it, but maybe I should. It's a very German ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more Germanic culture in this movie that I think people would kind of miss in translation for it.
Yeah, because I think while there is that certain level of an understanding of a cultural difference from my own, much like when I watch like Call Me by Your Name and those kinds of films, like you get a little bit more of that culture from the Italian culture in that way.
Yeah.
And it's nice when you see these films because they do kind of give you that here's the ways in which we are the same, here's the ways in which we are different. That's my favorite thing about foreign language films in the international market, is that you get to see how we are the same and how we are different. And I think that's where the film shines really well for me. I don't think the ending is as strong, even though I was actually probably most invested during the more serious part of the film.
Last couple minutes, right?
Yeah, so if the tonal shift had been a bit stronger, and if the film had ended on a bit more of a comfortable place, where I can still fill in the blanks, that's fine. But I think putting the right words in place to fill in the blanks.
And we got to the point where I think the whole point of this movie is, are you willing to pause your work to love somebody? Or give it an attempt to try to maybe explain to somebody, wow, I really, really want to fall in love with you. Let me put my work aside and let's concentrate on that. I think that's the whole point of the movie.
I think it's more so even that, do you have to pause what you're doing for that? Do you have to really get, like, because I think the thing is, he views it as, if anything that I'm doing that's not contributing to this book is a waste of time.
Yeah.
That's not the case at all. Everything that you're doing that's not right
Should
in
be
this book
incorporated.
is important to this book.
Yeah.
And the reason why his book sucks is because he's not actually living any of the life he's writing about. There's there's a section
gigantic
in there,
forest fire.
You know, we're worried about crushing the baby. You don't have any experiences in that world, and that's not to say that you can't write about things.
No,
you
but
don't
you have
know,
a gigantic
he's not
forest
there.
fire that you're living in. You understand the anxiety of it and all that stuff and what it does, the consequences of it. And you're not going to put that in your book?
Yeah.
As a publisher, like, well, you got a great inspiration right here. Is this in the story? No. Why the hell not?
Well, and why his publisher easily accepts the dinner invitation. He said he's got to be somewhere else tomorrow, but the moment he's asked to partake in a little bit of life, he's like, oh, of course, yeah, we can do that. And that's, you know, kind of where Nadia stands in, as almost this character who's almost like a muse to many of the people around her, and yet, because he shuts himself away from the opportunity to muse, he loses that muse. And so I think it's less about
sharing the same bedroom.
Yeah, I think it's less about would you give it up and more do you have to give it up.
Right.
Because I think
or
there's
why
that
not you
internal
putting
struggle.
putting this in your story?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I hate Leon, is because maybe he's got a little bit of me.
Yeah.
And I'm nothing if not self-loathing. So,
all right, it's an interesting movie, especially if you are a writer, to watch. But what do you think of our assessment of Afire? I hopefully it does get an official selection into German. I would love to see Christian get a little more spotlight onto what he's been making for films.
yeah, and it would be nice, I think, just outside of the film itself, it would be nice for this film to get some recognition, because you're right. A person like me who has watched over 6,000 movies, this is my first Petzold film, he's done quite a few. You know, he's actually made a good stamping. Yeah. So I think it would be nice to get his work out there a little bit more and have some people spread out. As much as I think the availability of the film being on Vudu and Amazon is good for getting other people interested in it. So from purely political for the Academy, they need a movie that's more accessible.
Yes.
More than anything, I think it's
they always do the
film.
opposite. Oh, it's hard to reach. Maybe there's something we need to shine a light on it. No,
Yeah.
accessibilities and making money is kind of why the hell? Yeah.
Well, I think they need a good step in the right direction for people that can watch their movie. But beyond that, I think it's a solid work.
Yeah.
It's not my top films of the year, but I think it's solid. I think it's worth watching, and I think especially if you're a creative, I think you need this wake up call. I think every creative needs this call every once in a while. Stop working, start living, and the writing, creating is part of the living. It's not part of the work.
I agree. In my assessment that you need to pause your creativity to live life, but also he's talking about you need to put life in your creativity.
Yeah. Only a German person could come up with the idea of stop and smell the flowers and make it as depressing and and I say that as somebody who is half German. That's our thing.
Oh, stop thing. Right. Yes. Yeah. All right. What do you think of our critique of Afire? Keep it going. Put a comment down below. Right there.
Yeah. What's the next Petzold film you want us to be depressed about? Let us know in the comments section. And while you're down there, please like and subscribe.
Trans is very depressing.
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us. Once again, you can find all of my film reviews, including a number of 2023 reviews, over at goatfilmreviews.com.
All right. And you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts, and you can probably check it out for creativity.